The soldiers aboard the Veraquium had faced unimaginable horrors. Beasts that tore through steel, alien species that obliterated entire civilizations in hours, and enemies that controlled the fabric of space itself. They were the galaxy's elite, the Kaled, a warrior race known for their strength, strategy, and fearlessness. But tonight, an unfamiliar tension crept through the ship. In the dimly lit mess hall, they sat in silence, every eye fixed on the hunched figure in the corner. His name was Grisk. His pale skin, almost translucent under the faint lights, bore scars unlike any the Kaled soldiers had seen, scars that whispered of battles far older than even their longest campaigns. His yellow eyes, however, were what unsettled them most. They were ancient, haunted, as if they had seen something that no being should ever witness. "You think you know war?" Grisk's voice was a raspy whisper, low but cutting through the quiet murmurs like a blade. The room went still. Even the faint hum of the ship's engines seemed to fade away. "You think you've seen fear?" The Kaled soldiers, hardened veterans of countless battles, felt a strange, unfamiliar sensation creep up their spines. Dread. Grisk's words, spoken with a gravity that no one dared question, hung in the air, heavy with meaning. "You haven't seen anything?" Grisk continued, his voice carrying the weight of untold horrors. He leaned forward, his yellow eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Let me tell you about a world so deadly, so merciless, that surviving it makes every battle you've fought look like a training exercise. A death world called Earth." For a moment, no one spoke. The name didn't register with the Kaled soldiers. Earth. It sounded insignificant. Just another planet, perhaps in some forgotten corner of the galaxy. A young soldier, his scales gleaming a faint green under the lights, broke the silence. "Earth? Never heard of it." Grisk's lips curled into a grim smile. "Of course you haven't." He paused, letting his words settle in. "Because if you had, you wouldn't be sitting here so calmly." Captain Zorith, the towering Kaled commander with deep blue skin and glowing red eyes, leaned back in his chair, his expression skeptical. "We've conquered worlds that burn with acid rain, fought creatures born in the heart of neutron stars. What makes this Earth so special?" Grisk's smile vanished. His eyes darkened, and when he spoke again, his voice was cold. "Earth isn't like any other world. It's a death world, perhaps the deadliest in the known universe. But it's not just the environment that's hostile. It's everything. The air, the water, the animals, the plants, even the humans." The word hung in the air, humans. The Kaled soldiers exchanged puzzled glances. Humans? Fragile, primitive beings, no doubt. Hardly worth mentioning in the same breath as the monsters and empires they had crushed underfoot. "Humans?" A soldier sneered. "Weak, fragile creatures, I assume?" Grisk chuckled darkly. "That's what I thought too, until I met them." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "And then I realized, humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy." The mess hall fell into a stunned silence. The idea was absurd. How could a species as fragile as humans be dangerous? The Kaled, with their impenetrable armor-like skin, their advanced weapons, and their unparalleled strength, could crush a species like that without breaking a sweat. Seeing their disbelief, Grisk's smile returned, colder this time. "You don't believe me? Let me tell you a story. A story about how I survived alongside these fragile creatures on their death world, and how they saved me in a war I thought was unwinnable." Grisk leaned back, his yellow eyes glowing faintly in the dim light as he began his tale. "It was during the Zelphid Wars," he said, his voice taking on a distant, almost haunted tone. "The Zelphid were an unstoppable force. They consumed everything in their path, planets, species, entire civilizations. They were relentless, a hive mind with no mercy. We thought we could fight them off, but our forces were decimated. We needed reinforcements, so we sought help from a small, isolated world at the edge of the galaxy. Earth." The soldiers were silent, hanging on every word. The Zelphid were legendary, an empire of conquerors that had spread across the stars, consuming entire systems. The idea that reinforcements could come from an insignificant planet like Earth seemed laughable. We expected nothing, Grisk continued. When we arrived on Earth, it was chaotic. The planet itself seemed to be at war with its inhabitants. The gravity was heavier than we were used to, and the storms, ion storms that could fry a ship's systems in seconds, raged across the landscape. Even the ground wasn't stable, with tectonic activity threatening to rip the land apart. He paused, letting the memory wash over him. And yet, humans thrived there. They had adapted to survive in an environment that should have killed them 1,000 times over. Grisk's voice grew quieter. I met them, the human soldiers who would fight alongside us. At first glance, they were nothing special. No natural armor, no claws, no advanced technology. They were small, fragile by our standards, armed with primitive weapons, guns that fired metal projectiles, explosives made from simple chemicals. I thought they wouldn't last a single battle. He looked up, his yellow eyes locking onto Captain Zorith. But I was wrong. So very wrong. The battle had been chaos. The Zelphid descended on Earth with their full might, ships the size of cities, weapons capable of turning continents to ash, and legions of warriors bred for a single purpose: to kill. Grisk remembered the moment the Zelphid fleet appeared in the sky, their massive warships blocking out the sun. The ground shook as their weapons rained down destruction, and the Kaled forces braced for what they believed would be their final stand. But the humans didn't flinch. They fought like nothing I'd ever seen before, Grisk said, his voice thick with disbelief. The Zelphid were stronger, faster, better equipped. But the humans, they had something the Zelphid didn't. They had ingenuity. They used the very planet against the invaders, traps, ambushes, guerrilla tactics. They lured the Zelphid into areas where the terrain became a weapon. Avalanches, floods, even the storms. They turned every aspect of their Deathworld into a tool of war. Grisk's voice trembled slightly, as if he still couldn't believe what he had witnessed. I saw them take down Zelphid war machines, beasts that towered over them, using nothing but their wits and crude explosives. They fought like demons, and they didn't stop, no matter how many of them fell. The Kaled soldiers were silent, their disbelief slowly turning into grim fascination. They had never heard of humans being capable of such things. And then, Grisk said, his eyes darkening, there was Commander James Holloway. Grisk's voice dropped lower as he spoke of the human commander. Holloway was unlike any human I'd ever met. He wasn't the strongest or the fastest, but his mind was a weapon sharper than any blade. He could see patterns in chaos, anticipate the enemy's moves before they made them. Grisk leaned forward, his voice growing more intense. There was one battle in particular. The Zelphid had us surrounded. We were outnumbered 10-1, and their ships had cut off our escape. Our forces were scattered, demoralized. I thought it was the end. But Holloway, he didn't flinch. He looked at the battlefield, and I swear in that moment he saw the outcome. The soldiers in the mess hall sat on the edge of their seats, their eyes wide with anticipation. Holloway led us into what looked like a suicide mission, Grisk continued. He took a small group of us, barely 100, and we charged straight into the heart of the Zelphid's forces. At first, I thought he had lost his mind. But then I realized he was playing a game none of us could see. Grisk's voice grew quieter, as if reliving the moment. He had lured the Zelphid into a trap. Using the terrain and the storms, he had created a bottleneck, forcing their forces into a narrow canyon. And when the time was right, he detonated charges he had placed along the canyon walls. Grisk paused, his eyes distant. The canyon collapsed. Thousands of Zelphid soldiers were crushed under tons of rock. Their war machines, their weapons buried. Holloway had turned what looked like certain death into a decisive victory. The Kaled soldiers were speechless. The idea that a human, a species they had considered weak and primitive, could outsmart and defeat an enemy as powerful as the Zelphid was beyond anything they had imagined. And that, Grisk said, his voice cold, is what makes humans so dangerous. They don't just survive. They adapt. They learn. They take the impossible and make it possible. And when they don't fight to survive. They fight to win. For a long moment, no one spoke. The mess hall was thick with tension, the air heavy with the weight of Grisk's words. The Khalid soldiers, who had faced countless enemies and conquered entire worlds, felt a chill they hadn't experienced in years. Finally, Captain Zorith broke the silence, his voice low and measured. If humans are so dangerous, why haven't they expanded beyond their world? Why haven't they come for us? Grisk's gaze shifted to the captain, his expression unreadable. Because they don't know we exist. Not yet. The room fell into an uneasy silence. But mark my words, Grisk said, his voice dropping to a whisper. One day they will. And when they do, they won't stop. They'll spread across the stars like a plague, and there will be nothing we can do to stop them. Captain Zorith narrowed his eyes. Are you saying they're unbeatable? Grisk shook his head slowly. Not unbeatable, but unstoppable. They'll fight until there's nothing left to fight for. And when they run out of enemies, they'll turn on each other. They've done it before. They'll do it again. The Khalid soldiers shifted uneasily in their seats, the gravity of Grisk's words sinking in. They had never faced an enemy like the humans, an enemy that didn't just fight with weapons, but with sheer, unrelenting willpower. Grisk stood, his pale figure casting a long shadow across the room. Beware the humans, he said, his voice a cold whisper, because when they finally look to the stars, the galaxy won't be ready for them. With that, he turned and walked out of the mess hall, leaving the Khalid soldiers in stunned silence. The Khalid soldiers, the most feared warriors in the galaxy, remained seated, their thoughts racing. They had faced countless enemies, fought in battles that shook the very foundations of the universe. But the thought of an entire species like the humans, hardened by a death world, capable of turning the most hopeless situations into victories, left them with a sense of unease they had never known. As the night wore on, the mess hall slowly emptied, but the tension lingered. Somewhere out there, on a small, forgotten planet called Earth, a species was waiting. A species forged in the fires of a world designed to kill. And when they finally emerged, nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again.